Kibali National Park is in western Uganda, and it was a forest reserve for quite a while before it became a national park. It was actually established as a forest reserve in 1932 by the British colonial authorities. In 1995, it officially became a national park. Chimpanzees are interesting as chimpanzees, but they do have a privileged position when it comes to looking at humans and trying to understand the origins of ourselves and of our own behavior. Over the years, I've done focused research on aspects of social relationships, especially those of males, which are really interesting and important in chimpanzees. Males are fascinating. They are really unusual for mammals, and in ways that are rather like male humans. Males are more sociable than females, and they spend just more time with other adult chimpanzees, and especially with each other. And they are rivals. They compete for mating opportunities. They compete for status, which then can influence mating opportunities. But there's a lot of friendly interaction that goes on between males, and male chimpanzees groom with each other more than they groom with females, and more than females groom with each other. And that's the exact opposite of what you would see in a baboon group, for example. Males also cooperate with each other in other ways. Some of them form alliances with each other. They will back each other up against others in their community, and that can be extremely important in a male's efforts to rise in rank in the dominance hierarchy, and especially can be really important for a male who becomes alpha. He may not get there unless he has effective alliances, and if he gets there, he quite likely won't be able to stay there unless he has some allies who will back him up against other males. On another level, though, all the males in a community are allies with each other against males in neighboring communities. And again, one of the somewhat disturbingly human-like aspects of chimpanzee behavior is that neighboring groups don't get along. In fact, they are intensely hostile to each other. And most of the hostility is males against outsiders. And it takes the form of groups of males engaging in aggression towards outsiders. And if they meet a group of outsiders and they're sort of evenly matched, then they may make a lot of noise, but they're unlikely to try to get engaged in any serious fights. If it's 15 from Ngogo and only one or only a few from the neighboring community, then they try to attack them. And then it's all the males from Ngogo cooperating in this and making a gang attack, really, that can be extremely serious to the point where they kill other chimpanzees. A number of Yale graduate students who have done PhD work there, and some of them have also incorporated laboratory work into their projects. So they go there and do field work, and they go around following chimpanzees and collect urine from them, for example, and then they can do hormonal assays back here. And you can get information on endocrinology, you can get genetics data, and then that allows us to answer questions that people have wanted to have answers to but not been able to. But if we can get enough good data on genetics, then we can tell who the fathers are, which you could never do from behavioral data, given the chimpanzee mating system, which is complicated, but most of the mating, that is, most of the copulations between males and females, take place in situations where there's a female who's interested in mating, and she's with a number of males, sometimes, especially at Ngogo, many sexually mature males, and she may actually mate with all of them. We just can't know who the fathers are unless we can do paternity determinations using DNA, which is possible now. And we have well over 70 paternity determinations. That's an extraordinary number to have that many now. And this is an ongoing project. Now we know who a lot of the fathers are. We can see if there's anything unusual about relationships between that male and his actual offspring compared to his relationship, say, to other infants or juveniles. Mothers and their offspring can have really lifelong social ties with each other, although for the most part that's mothers and their sons. We have one wonderful old lady who has to be in her 50s now, and she has a son who himself is getting rather old now. He's definitely middle-aged. Our best guess is he's in his late 30s. They still spend a lot of time together. They groom with each other, especially he grooms her a lot. He's a good son. He's still very close with his mother. There's a lot of variation in the social worlds of females, and at Ngogo, one important finding we've made is that the females there are more sociable than females in most other chimpanzee populations, and that's because they've got a better food supply generally, and given that better availability of food, they can just afford to be with each other more, and some of them have long-term social bonds with each other, and in a few cases we've discovered or we know that these are mothers and daughters, and the daughters have not immigrated. But in other cases we know they aren't related to each other, but they've developed real friendships with each other, and these clearly can last for years and years. Chimpanzees are omnivores, and they mostly eat fruit, and they eat leaves and plant stems and flowers, and in some places, but not really at Ngogo, they eat some insects. They like to eat meat, and they eat more meat than any other primates except humans. And they get it by hunting, and usually hunts involve groups of chimpanzees who go after groups of monkeys. And wherever chimpanzees live with red colobus monkeys, they focus on them, and they especially hunt them. They don't eat meat every day. They might go for weeks without any, and some individuals go for longer than that. But they really like it, and it makes sense. It's not easy to get, but it's nutritionally complete food, essentially. It's very valuable. Nutritionally, even small bits of it could be valuable to them. So, first of all, they get wildly excited while they are hunting, and then when they have meat and someone has some, others are really excited and they want some, and they share meat. I often see things like one male has a monkey and he will bite off a leg and literally hand it to someone else who's likely to be his ally or his number one grooming partner. This is, again, it's highly unusual behavior compared to other mammals, but rather like what humans do. Just the willingness to share and the extent to which everyone can benefit when they have something valuable like this. A couple of years ago, one of my students from Yale and I were out one day and we found a big group of chimpanzees, a big party, as we call them, out in the western part of the Ngogo chimps territory. And there was a lot of excitement when we got there, many chimpanzees together, lots of good food, and we thought, oh, this is going to be a good day, we're going to see a lot of interesting things. But then we realized that really there was a lot of excitement down the hill from where we were in this little valley. We got down there and we found that the chimpanzees had encountered a line of snares that poachers had set. Quentin, who was then an adolescent female who had pretty recently joined the Ngogo community, had been caught in a snare. She'd managed to break away from the pole, but she had the noose of wire pulled very tightly around her hand, and she was trailing this wire, and it had gotten caught up in some vegetation, and she was desperately trying to free herself, but she didn't know how to do that, so she was pulling and just making things worse. And the other chimpanzees were very upset by this, and several came right up to her and even touched her gently, reassuringly. They didn't know how to get her free. So I think they were showing a kind of a real concern. We pay several men who are experts at anti-poaching work, and they work with the park rangers. They help train them. They also work on their own sometimes, and they do a great job, and they really contribute importantly to protection of the chimpanzees and their habitat, but they can only cover a small fraction of that habitat, and they could find more men whom they could train who would also do a good job. And the Ugandan park authorities have told us that they would be happy to have us hire more men to cover more of the park. And the only question is, at the moment, we don't have the money to do that. If we did, then we could really step up the protection of the chimpanzees. Well, there's a world out there that's somewhat parallel to mine as an academic and a researcher, and that's the world of people who make wildlife documentaries. Alistair Fothergill, who was the producer for the Chimpanzee film, the Disney nature film, he was the one who really came up with the idea of doing a feature film, and he also approached John Matani, my colleague, collaborator, and me, and said this was what he was trying to do. He wanted to make this film. Would we be amenable to working with him and having a film crew come to Ngogo and so on? This is not a documentary, unlike the BBC films, but it is just chimpanzees, and it's all footage of wild chimpanzees. And he wanted to have a film crew come to Ngogo because he knew that that's the place to film wild chimpanzees. I had two roles in the film process, and one was that they asked me to look at scripts, and if I said, oh, well, this makes no sense whatsoever, this would never happen, they were willing to listen to that and change it a bit. Usually what I did was I went out early while they were getting ready, getting their equipment packed up and so on, and I had a radio so I could call to them back in camp and say, I'm out at H10 and I've got a good group here, so you should head out this way. Then I would help follow the chimps, help them keep up with them during the day. The cameraman, Bill Wallauer, who is an expert wildlife cinematographer, also knows chimpanzees because he worked for the Jane Goodall Institute at Gombe for many years. I could certainly give him a lot of background information about, this is Miles, he's the alpha male now, and this is his history, and this is what's going on between him and Monk, who's over there, and who's sort of his ally now. They understood that it's really important to have that context to know what to look for and try to film in the first place, and then to make sense out of the images that they got. When they know the context and they know the history and they know even who they're looking at and what those individuals are like and what their relationships with each other are. It will have a lot of good information about chimpanzees, and that will go along with just amazing images, wonderful photography, and I hope it inspires even more people to understand that these are very complicated animals, and they are fascinating and wonderful, and also that their status is rather shaky now. They're in trouble in the wild, and they need attention, and they need help from people. It is overwhelmingly clear now that the presence of long-term research projects helps to protect habitats and helps to protect the animals. We do stand to learn a lot about ourselves and about human evolutionary history, certainly by looking at chimpanzees. And there are some obvious places to look, and just at hunting and meat sharing, for example, or at male aggression towards outsiders. These are things that are characteristics of humans.